All right, what's up, everybody? So we are going to tie a fly that's kind of special to us, to Cheech and me. Our buddy Boyd Guymon, who passed away a few months back. This was one of his favorite patterns for Henry's Lake up in Idaho. And he would come in the shop and he'd tweak this pattern and get different materials for it. So in his honor, we're going to go ahead and do a tutorial for this. We call it Boyd's Henry's Lake Special, or Renegade. It's a double Renegade style. And it's got some different materials on it. And this is from a guy who fished there a lot. He'd drag his trailer up there, and his good wife would hang out with him. Anyway, this one's for you, Boyd. So we're going to start off with a fulling mill heavyweight champ, one of the favorite still water patterns. And this is a wet fly, so it's going to sink. You'll want to fish this with sinking line. And that's how Boyd would fish it. He'd fish it above the weed beds over there. And anyway, so we've adapted it a little bit. This is largely still his pattern. The only difference is that instead of some tubing, which he would use on the butt, we're going to use some cool UV resin. So this is a size 12 hook, but you can tie these in 10s and 12s, or even as big as 8. And so I'm just going to start with some thread and wrap that back. And I'll let that go right at the bend. Okay, now on his pattern, he would take some like midge tubing or any sort of bright red tubing, and he would slide that up onto the back and let it sit there, tie it in. Instead, what we're going to do is going to tie, we're going to move our thread back a little bit and leave room for the butt so that I can tie the first part of my hackle right above where the barb would be. So the barb would normally be right in here. And so from there, from where the thread is back to where the thread's hanging to where it was tied off, that's going to be our butt. So what we'll use here is fluorescent red UV Cure color resin from Solarez. This stuff's awesome. It's very opaque, and it cures tack-free, and it's got some bright UV awesomeness to it. So these UV resins from Solarez come with a little applicator, and so what I would do is just build up a little bit of a kind of a bulbous butt right at the back here. Okay, we got that where we want. And now we'll just hit it with the light. You notice that pops. There's just something about some of these materials that have that very nice relationship with the UV light that seem to do well with the fish as well. Not a lot of tack, so that's good. Now, this pattern's pretty easy. It's just going to consist of a body and a few pieces of hackle. So we're going to do, and let me tell you, if you don't have a size 10, 12 kind of range Coachman Brown saddle hackle, capes are all right too, you need to get one, because I'm starting to realize I tie a lot of stuff with this Coachman Brown. And so anyway, I'm going to take a piece of hackle. This happens to be a pro grade saddle, and I want that just a titch longer than the hook gap, kind of down just a little bit longer than the bottom of the hook. That's the length I want it. Now we're not going to tie in too many wraps here. Okay, so we've pulled a few fibers off the stem to leave some bare stem, and I want the stem to be tied on the side of the hook facing me, and I want to leave a little bit of bare stem so I can start my wraps and get a nice clean first wrap. Here's a little trick here. I'll work my thread back to right before that ball, and if I pull the hackle out away from me like that, it deforms the stem and helps it wrap a little cleaner, and it also gets those fibers trained in the right direction. So I'm only going to go couple, maybe 2.5 wraps here, and we'll tie that off. And don't worry about trapping fibers. I'm going to fix those suckers in a minute. Trim that off. Now I'll just pull these fibers back. All right, so very sparse. Okay, now the body's going to be some lucent chenille. This is the micro size in black. So normally this pattern you usually see it with peacock herl, but this is very peacock-ish. And we're just going to cut off a little bit. You don't need a ton because this is just going to go down the length of the body. Right up to where I kind of started that thread. And I like to snug the wraps up against each other. And then we'll lock that in and tie it off and cut it off. All right, so that's pretty easy so far. And then the other color is going to be, you can use white or cream or light ginger. I just like something light that's a contrast. So this is a cape. And I wanted to use a cape as well as a saddle, so the back here is a saddle. But the nice thing is about capes these days is they have fibers that are longer than saddles were a number of years ago. So, and same kind of thing, I'll just preen back the fibers and measure that. Okay, it's going to have the same overall hackle length as the front ones. Or the back one, sorry. And same routine, I'll just tie that in so that when I pull it out, the shiny side's facing forward. And that's not a prerequisite. I just kind of like the way it looks. And then I'll pass the thread forward a little bit. And then again, just a couple of wraps. There's one, two-ish, and then build up a little head. And I like to do that right at the end. And then I can come in here and trim out my hackle like so. I've got a couple of nasty stragglers here, so we'll pull that back. Okay, now we're just going to throw on a whip finish. Okay, now you can, if you want, put a little bit of head cement or resin on the head. And so I'm just going to add some flow or fluorescing. And this is just going to be a little tiny bit. Enough that I'll just throw it on the end of a bodkin. And then I'm just going to come in here and lightly tap that right on the head. And that kind of soaks in around there. And a little bit on the bottom. Okay, now one thing you will get with that is it's going to penetrate the eye of the hook there is going to be goobered up. So here's a little trick for you. So you can take the end of a hackle stem, and you want to do this before it's cured, And that just makes sure that that eye is clean. And you can even take a few feather or fibers up into there and it cleans it out. So now the eye is totally clear. And we'll just zap that with the light. Now you could just as easily have put some more of that other resin on there. But anyway, so that's it. That's Boyd's Special Renegade. You'll fish it on maybe an intermediate line or a midge tip, depending on how deep you want to go. But my guess is the fish take this as a snail or maybe a chironomid. I'm not sure, but it's a very effective pattern. If you're going to Henry's Lake, you'll want one of these or several of these in your box. Again, it's a Boyd Guymon variation, and give it a whirl. Get all the materials for this on our website, store.flyfishfood.com, or click the link below or one of the ones that popped up in the upper right-hand corner. The end.